Marshelle.
Hi, Bridget. This episode,
We're going to talk about
what are the things that are going on in our lives?
it's kind of like maybe this might be like,
Yeah, sorta, kinda.
life lesson.
hi. Well, hello.
Hi. Hello.
How are you?
I'm
Hello.
good. I'm good. I'm weird, clearly. And I'm Bridget.
Oh, I'm Marshelle.
And this is Yeah, Sorta, Kinda. Well,
Yeah.
Okay, look, we're doing a whole digital thing, and so forgive us. Sometimes our voices cut out and for each other, and we interrupt each other, and we don't mean to. But as long as, it doesn't end in fights, we're good.
Like that. Like that, for example, right on cue.
We should just raise our hand every time we intend on talking.
Like I do anyway, right? I'm always raising my hand.
Marshelle? Marshelle?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. So hi, guys. How's it going? That was me in response to my hand raising. How's it going? Interesting times.
It's interesting times, and it's going to be an interesting topic. We're going to try to narrow it down to say that this episode is about shadow people, but honestly,
Dun, dun, dun.
it's going to be about so much more because you can't really delve into that world, if you will, without touching other things. Wow, I don't know. That sounded weird, but
That did sound weird.
Touching
I was like, is that just me?
you, touching me. No, usually it's everybody.
Oh, and Bridget's mug. She has two mugs today, but this one
This
is
is my water mug, and it says, "Not today, Satan."
not today. And I have O for Fox's Sake, which has O for a little bitty cute fox in the middle, sake. And when Tommy first saw this mug, I was so proud of this mug. And he's like, O for sake? I don't get it. And he's like, what does it mean? Isn't that cute?
You're like, didn't you know how much I love sushi?
I know. I hate sushi, side note. But yeah, I like tempura.
I feel like this has already been mentioned, but Marcelle's a very picky eater. But that's not why we're here.
That's neither here nor there at this moment.
We are here to talk about a really creepy subject, something that we kind of love-hate. I don't know that we love it at all. I think it's more of it's fascinating, it's interesting, it's something we're diving into because there's people want to know more about it. People have experiences that they can't make sense of. So we're hoping to be able to shed a little light on that. And yeah. Oh, yes.
Thank you. And it's one of the oldest, most common ghost sightings, if you want to call it that. But it's really not a ghost. It's so much more than that. And it goes so far back. It goes
Something like
in the
500
BCs.
BC.
Yeah.
I remember hearing 500 BC.
Yeah, something like that. That like the ancients talked about it, made note, and however it was that they made notes, but about
Cave
shadow
drawings?
beings.
I have
Cave
heard
drawings?
reference to shadow people being on caves drawing.
Oh yeah, those the amorphous sort of shapes, right? And there's several types of it. And this is an interesting side note and a funny side note because we were doing all this research on shadow people, and my husband knows that. He had to go to the store the other night, so we got into the car, and he wasn't really thinking about it, but he adjusts his mirror. It's late at night. He adjusts his mirror, and he thought he saw a shadow person, and he freaked out. He totally had a moment. He's like, huh! And then he realized it was just Balsam's car seat cover. We have like this thing that covers and you got to hang it up.
Which leads me to, guys, some of you are going to think this is ridiculous to say a warning, and others of you are going to appreciate it. If you get easily creeped out, or if you have nightmares or sleep paralysis or anything that you feel maybe makes you more susceptible to this kind of a attack, if you will, or visitation, or whatever you want to call it, then maybe don't listen. Maybe don't listen, or prepare yourself a little mentally before we go down this rabbit hole, because I know Marshelle has a few stories for us tonight, and they're pretty eerie. First-hand accounts of things that she's experienced. So consider whether or not you really want to know.
Yeah, and, one would say, why talk about these things? Well,
Yeah.
A, why not? But B, it seems to be on the rise, and it's a very these types of sightings, and I think it's because, as they said in the remote viewing aspects of it, it feels like there's two worlds. We live in two worlds, and to deny that we live in a spiritual world as well, that we're part of that, is to sort of basically cut off one of your legs, because and so in my mind, talking about this helps to balance you out, because okay, what does this matter, this magical, what were you gonna say?
I was more, when you finish this thought, I want to interject something before you go into a new one.
Okay, so people have lost their jobs. I got to pay my bills. There's a pandemic. Why is this important? Because I think those sorts of things, the weight of life, does, in a way, perhaps try to make us, or it helps us to forget how magical we really are, and that there is so much more to this life than what we see. And what we've found with this research, with remote viewing, just in anything that Bridget and I tend to
gravitate towards.
Gravitate towards, is that it really is, some would say, is spiritual warfare. And if you don't believe in it, or maybe there's a part of you that, even if you don't believe in it, okay, all of us see something out of the corner of our eye. Right?
Yeah, that peripheral thing.
That peripheral vision.
Sometimes it's a light, sometimes it's a shadow, sometimes it's you think you see a figure. I mean, it could be all sorts of things.
Or you get that feeling of dread for some reason. Or, on the other side of that, who's on the phone before they even call. Or you think of someone, and then they call you, or they write you an email, or they text you, or whatever. As I had said last week, when a mother, or even a father for that matter, knows that something is wrong with their child, or twins, it's this connection. It's a spiritual connection. So I think it's just as important as paying your bills to wake up to this and address it, and embrace that side of ourselves that I think life really does try to rob you from.
Well, what do you mean life tries to rob you from?
Life meaning bills, just the daily, the daily rigmarole that we get really caught up in. And it reminds me of, in a way, of how you and I, or I know myself, when I would be like, oh, that's silly. There can't really be someone out there for me. Or why do I think this? Or why do I think that? Or why do I have this feeling on my heart that I should do something? And I would justify it as being a silly, illogical thought. But in reality, it was actually very true. There really was someone out there looking for me romantically. There was a friend. I'm pointing to Bridget.
Hi.
But all of my really core friends are. It's like we all recognize each other in some weird way. Mm-hmm. So what is that? That's why we talk about this stuff.
To elaborate on that weird way, I would say with Marshelle, when I met her, I remember being really drawn to Marshelle and feeling instantly really also accepted, if you will. I felt like she showed a deeper interest in me than almost anybody I've ever had met in my life, where I felt like she was intrigued and she really wanted to get to know the depth of me. And as someone who's always seen myself as a seeker, it's rare to get to find people in life to share that aspect with. And so I think when I met you, it was like, I knew immediately that you were a significant, I knew you were really cool, but, and I guess I don't know that I knew you were going to be a significant part of my life, but I sure knew I wanted you to be, The other thing, when I had raised my hand, however long ago that was, you had said something about, we were talking about the living in the two worlds, and I just wanted to add that I think for some people, thinking of it as in the language of multiple dimensions is a little mm-hmm. more, they're like, oh, okay, I can kind of get what you mean. Because anytime you're talking about spiritual beings or non-physical beings or any of those things, you're talking about something that exists on a plane that's not physical like we know it, Ooh, I sometimes forget that if I like tap on my table, I'm hitting my mic. But so I think of these beings that we're going to talk about tonight as existing on another dimension, if you will. But like we exist on multiple dimensions. And yes, again, this is a physical dimension here. And so it feels the most real, but we're also energetic beings. And anyway, I just wanted to expound on that one little point, but that's all I had to say on that part. Now
I like that. But also to say, and then we'll jump right into it. All my life, and when we all first met and started talking about all this, we were like, okay, we can't talk to people about this.
So funny. Fast forward a few years, and now we're sharing it all on a podcast.
Right. It's so funny. But
who knew?
I think it's time.
Yeah.
I really think it's time, and I think it's important. And I mean, that may sound silly, but it's just on my heart that it is important that we talk about these things and we be there for people. We can be a community, but also to have fun with it. So it's not so frightening. Yes.
It might sound silly to people who haven't had these experiences. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. Like, if you've had these experiences, especially if you've had them more than once, and you're past the point of questioning your sanity and you're at the point now of trying to seek to understand more, this isn't going to seem silly at all. It's going to be, like, probably refreshing.
Yes.
Because we know what it's like to not have anyone to really bounce these things off of.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't, I always talked about being a magical child and just, I did seem to just know things. Mm-hmm. And then I met other people in life that seemed to know the same things. And we've all kind of seen the same things. So therefore, there's some kind of truth to it, I believe. So, and I got to say, I'm a lot happier embracing this side of myself, and which I always did, but I just wasn't as vocal about it. It's beyond happiness, though. It really it's peace. It's because it involves an expansion. Like it's like almost difficult to put into words the importance of if it's on your heart to open yourself up and you feel like you're awakening. Mm-hmm. Instead of fighting it, to really explore that is so important. But I also recognize that everybody is on their own path, and we all have choices, and not everybody's willing. That does seem to be in all the research and all the things, and it's something I've always known, is it's choice. We all have the choice to either embrace what we really are, to embrace good, to embrace evil, to make a stand on the way you look at life, on your beliefs, especially like what's going on now in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's time to do that. So we kind of want to be, because we want to be there for people also, to be like, sort of a resource or a sounding board or a bit of it, like, you know what, guys, we've seen it too, or we've experienced that too, or I don't know what that is. Let's find this out.
Right.
And also it's fun. I mean, it is. It's fun, I think, to be like, wow. Well, that was... And also, why do we experience these things? I have had the most weird, true experiences. And luckily for me, other people were involved. So it wasn't just me experiencing it. And I could write it off as like, well, maybe I'm crazy. you know? But, I mean, other people saw it. Other people felt it. Other people were there.
Well, like that one time I shared my apparition story, I was with somebody else, but they so quickly talked themselves out of having seen this like ghost-like mist. And so it goes both ways, because sometimes it's validating, and other times it can actually make you question yourself even more if somebody's with you and they're like, nope.
But you know what? I think that's just as important, guys, because it's the mistakes I've made in life, or the people that have been like that has made me, I look back at it now, be able to truly trust my instincts.
Amen.
Truly trust my intuition. I just think that's what it's all about. So, come with us. You know what I mean? Come with us. Come do this. Let's do this together.
I just want to say one thing about trusting your instincts. Mm-hmm. It's not about an egoic need to be right. And I think some people, as they're navigating this, get that a little confused.
You're right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I can describe the difference, However, if you find yourself, because the thing is, truth is truth is truth.
Yeah.
So there really is no need, there really needs to be no attachment to the truth. And if you find yourself needing to be right about something, then it's very possible what's driving that isn't truth, but is ego. So, well, not very possible. I mean, it's straight up is ego. But it could, okay, your ego could be involved and it could still be about truth. But if you need to be the one, the right one, and it's coming from you, you got to be careful with that because that's a trap.
Yeah. So learn from it. Learn to be able to discern within yourself. That's choice again. You know, do I want to be my higher self? Which I think it's time. Humanity's becoming incredibly disappointing of late. Finding fault with everyone and everything and looking for reasons to be cruel. And I think it takes a strong person. Yes.
I have an example. Like, there's a difference between wanting to create yourself to be an instructor where you are responsible for empowering other people versus wanting to empower other people through their own self-discovery. And I guess I'm talking about like self-made gurus and things like that, you know, where it's like, can you, guru, take yourself out of the equation and really truly make it about the other person, supporting them, holding space for them, helping them be, I don't know how loud these airplanes are, but if it gets really bad and the fireworks start going off, I'm going to close some windows.
Oh, okay.
It's really,
side note.
Sorry, it's a helicopter. But anyway, yeah, I feel like
It was a good point. I get you.
yeah, we've said we've covered all that. Now what?
So now let's talk about shadow people.
All right, let's pause
Okay.
because I am going to close that window because
Okay.
it's very loud. Doors are closed. Now
Ready? Now on to shadow
people.
Okay.
So what are they?
You first.
What do they look like? How do people experience them? What do they feel when they're around? You know?
Very good. Here is a definition I found that's a pretty good way to start it off.
Okay.
Supernatural, shadow-like humanoid figures that, according to believers, are seen flickering on walls and ceilings in the viewer's peripheral vision. Some see head-on, some see in corners, some see, some say they feel menacing, scary, creepy, harboring ill intent, and there's an oppressive feel. Some think they are the true form of a ghost. I don't think so. That's just my thing. Some think they are time travelers or interdimensional beings on a visit to our current time and place. I don't know about that. Some would say that it's psychological due to physiological conditions such as sleep deprivation, paralysis, illusions, hallucinations, the beginnings of dementia, drug or alcohol side effects, medication side effects. And this is something, I'll lead into this. And some would say that when they've seen, they usually just kind of pass through. They're not really paying attention to you when you see them. Now, I've never experienced that. I've always experienced them head on, dead on, looking right at me, and basically challenging me or feeling very aggressive. So I haven't really experienced that part.
Can you? So I've never seen a shadow person. In that as far as I know or remember, I've had experiences of things, but more felt than seen. So I'm wondering, is what I've read, can you validate that it's almost always a human-like figure, but that takes up three-dimensional space, but as black can be, and is featureless?
Okay, here's the thing. Now, some see them as being very tall. Some see, now that's what you and I both found, is it seems like there's a lot of cross-referencing or a lot of...
Right, because there's things that people call the slender man.
Yeah, and that's not what we're talking about.
And that's
but
something different, but maybe what some people have referred to as a shadow person.
Right.
But we're making a differentiation here.
We're making a differentiation because it seems that most everyone, it is a separate thing. Some have seen them to be short, like 4 feet, big red eyes, kind of opaque, an opaque blackness, maybe almost wing-like. My shirt goes along with that. Others very tall. Some said two-dimensional, very flat, but again opaque, very thick. What I saw, I've seen 3 different types. One I saw at a friend's house that I guess would be straight up like what I would say that is a shadow person. I don't know what it is. It was very humanoid, solid, thick, like a dark gray black. And it was just all of a sudden, I felt something weird, and I turned around and I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye, and I looked back at it, and it was behind this what is that, coat tree. And then it was like it came forward, and all I saw was like the top of the head with the shoulders, and I couldn't really see anything other than that. Like I couldn't see below that. I didn't see a body in that sense, but there was such a feeling, like this sort of like a wavering feeling around it of energy. Like my eyes seemed to kind of change, and it looked at me head on, and it didn't feel kind.
Any features?
No,
Okay.
no features. I didn't see any face. I mean, I could tell where it would be like if someone had a ski mask on without the eyes, like where you could see like the nose impression, that you could tell there's sunken in area where the eyes would be, and a chin, you know, and a face shape. And then and a very almost a staticky sound in my ears, and a very heavy feel, and then it was gone.
And it was, you said it
Literally
was very
just-
confronting, right? It was
Yeah,
like confronting you, or was it being, was it aggressive? Like, what would you?
Just the
know.
vibe, the feeling that came off of it it was a challenging. I think that's a good word for that. It felt challenging, and there was like this sense of static, and it almost felt like, yeah, like the energy in the air was like wavering. It was. I don't really know how to explain that. It was electric.
Let me ask you this: why do you think it left?
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know. That was like the most odd, because there was no meaning to that. You know, it was just there, and then it was gone.
And how long do you think it was there?
I'm sorry, what?
How long do you think it was there for?
Maybe half a second, maybe a second, maybe
Oh,
a
wow.
minute. I don't know. It just was so. But yeah, I'd say maybe half a minute. 30 seconds, something like that. It just wasn't a very long time, but I couldn't deny it. Now that's the only thing. Yeah, where no one was there with me, but I've experienced enough in my life to know that there's something there, there's something there. I've seen the red eye type thing, but it wasn't like what people are describing, were these short little. This felt very thick and muscly and like a demon to me, like a lower level demon, and with red eyes over in a corner. This was with the Satanist that I'd run into, and this girl had left this bag in my corner.
I feel like you want to. Do you mind expounding just a little bit on what you mean by this is with the Satanist?
I'm not really going to get into it too much. I'm
Yeah.
not sure that I ever
I don't know
really
that
will.
you
I don't
should.
know that it's wise to anyway. We'll get into that another time, why it's not good to do that. I ran into these people and there was a group of them with my group of friends at the time in St. Louis. And they said they'd been looking for me. And that's all I'm really going to say about that.
Creepy.
And
That's so creepy.
Yeah, and it's so weird. And I was like, okay, and I'm not really going to get into any of that. But this is the point of it. I befriended this one girl for like a week, maybe 2 weeks, who was in it. She said she did the ploy of, I want to get out of it. I've had, it's I need help. Something always seems to run my friends away from me, blah, blah, blah. She had come over to my house. We were all going to go out later that night. And I think I was going to have her spend the night. I don't remember. I just remember she came over. She had stuff. Maybe we were getting ready together at my house. Although, I will say, I did do a protection thing around the house before she came in. Just my instinct to do that. And, like where you take sage and you sort of, if anyone wants to know, I might have even done salt. I don't know. I might have even put that around a doorway or something.
If you're watching on YouTube, this is what sage looks like, a little
Yes.
chunk of it.
And it is a truly helpful thing. And she had a bag with her brush, with her hair, and clothes, pictures of her kid, all of these things. I don't know why she brought all this stuff. And she left that bag at my house. And when we had all gone out, and I think, I don't really remember. I just remember I was like, ooh, I think that was when I decided, I don't think I'm going to hang out with this person anymore. Something weird had happened. I don't really remember right now. And it's not really relevant. And I remember falling asleep and I was like, oh shit, her stuff's over there. I was like, well, whatever. I fell asleep, woke up. I'm not really going to talk about everything that happened. But there was this thing dark in the corner, and I realized it's exactly where her bag was. I didn't put it together at first, but it woke me up, and it had these, and I thought I was seeing things at first, and I was like rubbing my eyes to really get but there was something in the corner, and you could feel this energy. I mean, it was evil. It hated me. It was just seething. That's the word that comes to mind. And then I didn't see it at first, but then I started to see, it's like it was crouching in the corner, almost like an ape would, or something like that.
Well, because you said it was really muscular, right?
It was really muscular and a thick tar-like black. It almost felt like a tar-like thing, like made of tar. It was really weird. But then all of a sudden, these eyes started to glow red, and they started to come out of the... So I called my brother, who knows how to handle this sort of thing. He was
Well, that's handy.
Yeah. And I called, and he told me to call my other friend, and some of you might get turned off by this, but we prayed. And she said that until my brother got there. I have never experienced anything quite like that before in my life. And that thing was there in the corner. My dog couldn't get into the room. The door slammed shut. My dog was trying to get in. He was freaking out. He was clawing at the door, trying to get in. And my friend was trying to pray with me, and she said the phone was getting hot, and she started hearing static.
So you called your friend on the phone, and she was trying to pray with you through the phone.
She was trying to pray with me over the phone, and while my brother was on his way over, and my brother lived like 40 minutes away. And, yeah, that's pretty much all I'm going to say about that.
Let me ask you this. What did you do about that girl's stuff?
My brother took it and burned it.
There you go.
Yeah, and he did a thing. My brother's amazing, I gotta say.
Never met him, but if you're watching this, howdy.
Hi,
I've heard
Tim,
a lot
who's
about
listening.
you.
My beautiful brother. My siblings are beautiful,
All good
beautiful
things.
people, inside and out. Very special people. My siblings. My whole family. Yeah.
Well, now
so
I feel like I have to say something about how great my family is.
Well, we all know that, though.
I'm teasing. I'm just trying to be... I mean, I'm not teasing. They are great. Hi, because they listen too. I love you. I'm teasing. I'm just being funny. Wow, that's terrifying. And I've never experienced anything like that. That kind of reminds me of almost like something in a movie, because it's so surreal. And I feel like if anybody else out there has had experience like this, to me, that's the time when you kind of want to involve like a professional. Like, and I mean, when I say that, I mean like a shaman or a priest.
After this the experience with the Satanists, all of my friends, we all did go talk to priests and on our own, without telling the other that we were doing it, or to shamans or whatever that we knew. It just has to be someone that's reputable and that feels true within you. That's where that intuition really comes in. I think we all have a barometer of truth within us. It's just we don't always listen to it. And then there was a hat guy experience. We'll get into that in a second. A lot of people, though, have talked about these little dark tar-like beings with eyes like sitting on their chest. There's a lot of folklore about civilizations from all across the world all have these experiences. They all talk about something like this, whether it's in your sleep, like sleep paralysis. You talked about that before.
I did. Matter of fact, episode 16, we had somebody write in and ask for advice, and during that episode I shared my sleep paralysis experience, and I didn't go into detail about what I saw during that, but I think we should, if you want to go ahead and cut in that excerpt. Okay,
yeah, let's do
so
that.
I'll go now. Basically, I was asleep, and I woke up in a sense that there was an awareness, but I was not exactly in my body like I am now, where I have movement. I could not physically move. I couldn't speak or make sound. I honestly couldn't even breathe initially. It actually felt like I had stopped breathing and had stopped breathing for a while. So it was almost like waking up underwater, but not fully awake either. And it felt like there was a very menacing presence in the room. And I mean, yeah, it did feel like something was physically on top of me. Now, could all this be explained with science being like, oh, this was what my brain was releasing, these chemicals, and this was maybe. But for me, it was very much a supernatural experience, and was to this day the most terrifying thing I've ever gone through. And it also felt like my body thought it was close to death. Like it just had like this really eerie weight to the experience. So what ended up happening is like I'm trying to move and I can't, and my eyes are still closed. What was weird though is even though my eyes were closed, it was like I could actually see.
Okay.
And I've had that experience a few times where I wonder if anyone else can relate to that, where your eyes are closed but you can actually see the space you're in. Again, can't explain it, just something that's happened a few times. So I remember making a noise, like, but my mouth wouldn't even open for it to come out. And it was almost like I was hearing it from a dimension or two away. So that's when I knew, oh, I'm not fully awake. And then I woke the rest of the way, in that I then became like reincorporated into my body, and I could then animate my body again. And to this day, it's one of the most difficult things I've ever tried to explain. But other people I know that have had the experience are like, yes, I understand what you mean. But anyway, it changed me because I just couldn't ignore that sense of a presence. And I think for so long I had been trying desperately to ignore the sense of a presence. Yeah, so that was my experience with sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
I'm going to let Marshall take it over for a second, and maybe I'll describe what I saw during that experience. But why don't you?
That's what we were discovering, is that a lot of people would talk about, or why do a lot of people see it when they're sleeping? And we don't know, are these the same things? Are they part of, some sort of demonic?
Well, and I think the reason why you're saying this is because a lot of the information that's out there is associated with sleep paralysis, but you specifically saw things during the day, and so you were like, I want to find what's out there about my experience during the day. Like, what is it? And so it doesn't sound so much like they are necessarily different things. It's just that they are kind of the same thing, but that people are seeing them at different times of the day.
That's what I was going to say. Or maybe it is sort of the same thing, but some people are just more, from what I heard, some people are just, they vibrate at a higher level.
Or some say you go in a different brain state,
Yeah. Some people are just sleeping. More in tune automatically.
I see what you're saying. You're talking about the waking people, vibrating higher.
Yeah.
And then what I was trying to say about about the different brain states is that when we fall asleep, we go into these different brain states. And so I was trying to imply that maybe that's why people are more open to seeing these things at that time. I'm more sensitive between waking and falling asleep, that moment where you're slipping into sleep or waking up from it. I've had all sorts of experiences in that in-between state, so I can relate.
And that's what we were saying, is that when you sleep, I think that's why a lot of people see things when is that logic doesn't enter into your brain. You are you're at your most receptive. You're more sensitive. You're kind of in between the worlds, shall we say.
When she says logic, think of it more like the analytical mind. You don't, because I don't want it to sound like, oh, it's these illogical assumptions. It's like your mind doesn't have the opportunity to make sense of something so quickly that you like shut down the experience.
It can't reason you out of what you're seeing. It's where you can
Exactly.
talk yourself out of, oh, that was just. Now, me personally, I'm like, is that a light from outside? You know, like I'll look at some, did my
God.
curtain blow?
Yes,
You know, is there
how
a fan
funny
on?
is it? We don't sound to you guys probably anywhere near as skeptical as we actually are.
We're so skeptical.
We're so skeptical. Like
almost
it took us
hypocritical.
so long to get to this point. Mm-hmm. And you're just gonna have to take our word for it.
And that's what I would say. No, you know, it's always so funny when people's like, "I'm not crazy," because then you just sound crazy. You're like, "I'm not crazy."
I'm not crazy.
But yet,
But guys, we're not crazy.
we're not. But
crazy.
that's so we're moving into a phase of with you guys. Let's just jump in of like if we say we've experienced it, we've rationalized every possible excuse it could be, and we'll both watch shows, we'll listen to things, we're like, that's such bullshit, you know, like listen to, I mean, like, come on, you know, whatever. It's just because there are a lot of fake people out there. There's a lot of charlatans.
there's some. It's sensationalized. Like people will try to get views, or they'll try to like.
Yeah, right.
Forgive me. I have ow.
What? I'm
just fixing. My earbud. So. It doesn't matter, but I just had to fix something under there. It's good now. I'm no longer in pain.
But this was something. A lot of people that are on drugs, or they do happen to see these things. But I know there seems to be this phenomenon of people on crystal meth happen to see shadow people. Like, all the time. Yes, go ahead. What were you going to say? She's raising her hand.
So I have a sober friend. He's been sober like over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, I was like, hey, did you ever used to do meth? And he was like, yep. I was like, okay. Is there a thing, like a shadow person thing? And he was like, oh, yeah. I was like, really? Do tell. And he's like, it feels, he's like, let me tell you this. It feels like, almost like it's so specific. It's almost as though meth was invented or created for this very purpose. He's like, it feels so intentional. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay. And I love, Marshall's always said, because people are like, okay, but maybe you're all just imagining it. They're like, yeah, but we all see.
This is what they said. They're like, well, we all see shadow people. It doesn't matter how long we've been up. We don't see shadow cats. We don't see shadow dogs. We don't see shadow birds. We see shadow people, like in the windows, walking towards us on a sidewalk, behind us. We're like, what is that? And, you know, I mean, there's always been this, you know, as some of you know, and I don't really talk about it much, but I'm going to. Scott Weiland and I were really good friends. And one of the things that we loved talking about was ghosts and demons and angels. And it was always pretty much, have you seen this? Have you seen that? And he always thought that cocaine was a demonic drug. And he always thought that, he might have written about it in his book. I'm not sure. He always, and it doesn't matter that he was on, it does matter. What I'm getting at is he was not a crazy person. Some people have been talking, this is a side note here, but just because he had issues with his bipolar medication or he had problems with drugs and alcohol, he still was a very smart, intelligent, discerning, beautiful human being who truly, I mean, we knew each other since our 20s. And if not long, I mean, like, we feel like we grew up together, and he always saw these things, and it wasn't because he was crazy. And I just think that's a very important thing to say. There are people out there, paranoid schizophrenics or whatever, who they're not, and maybe they are sensing something, I don't know, but maybe they're going into a much darker place with it, and it's giving them an excuse to, it's making them crazier, shall we say. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not going to dismiss that, but it is very relevant. He always said he thought cocaine was a demon's drug. That it was either like a portal or a gateway, or it allowed things. It's like an invitation to letting something in. And that's what you and I have found with all of this stuff they keep saying. In
our research. Just to
Yeah,
clarify, I didn't want to be like with experience because I've never done
yeah,
coke
no.
in my life.
She's never done. No. I mean, in research,
What we found in our research.
That's probably important to discern that. Actually, it's probably
We've
important
got
to say that.
clarify some of these things because some of you take things and run with them.
Yeah, they did. Well, I mean, I was a wild child back in the day, but I'm not anymore. And I saw stuff in complete sober states. I mean, so it doesn't. That's not the point. What was I getting at?
We were getting at in our research. I don't know if you were gonna riff on the meth thing or the drug thing, but
the responsibility, realizing when you're doing drugs or playing with tarot cards, even Ouija boards, you see ghosts or whatever, you do want to be careful and take certain precautions because you are inviting something in. I mean, it's just plain and simple.
I'm going to try to find... Well, what I want to find is a real quick side note about this quote that I found about the Ouija board.
Okay.
The Ouija board named itself. According to its inventors, Ouija was the game's response to the question of what it wanted to be called. They also claim that when they asked what Ouija means, it replied, "Good luck." So, that's creepy.
Yeah, like that's not scary at all. I'm going to play with that.
Oof.
It's not a game. It's not a game. The shadow people. This is something else that we saw in the research. It seems that they're energy vampires. My stepmother always talked about this, the things that she would see or that the shows that she watched.
Or an energetic parasite is another word you could use for that.
And it reminds me now, there was this shaman that you and I both listened to.
Thunderstrikes.
That was his Native American name he had.
May he rest in peace.
Oh,
I'm so
everybody
sad
we want to talk to is passed.
Gone, because we would have loved to have picked his brain.
What he said, and he was going according to Native American, I think it was called Twisted Hair Prophecies, and all this research that they've done.
Yeah.
With which was a combination of all the tribes, like all the common experiences that each tribe has experienced.
And isn't that where they got twisted hair from? Right? It's because it's and he was East Cherokee
and half Irish.
Yes.
He was, you guys, he was amazing.
He was really interesting. But also, like, ex-military, like, gun-toting, like, he was a feisty guy, too. Like, it wasn't...
Texan.
It was so interesting listening to him in an interview because it's like, he seemed kind of, like, gruff and Texan, and then all of a sudden he would drop this knowledge.
He just felt truthful.
Did you hear that?
Whoa.
Did you hear that?
Well, that's firework, right?
One can assume. That could
Let's
be.
hope.
I mean, we were just talking about Thunderstrike. And he's like, "Hello, ladies. I'm here. Thank you for bringing me up." Oh my God, actually, that's giving me chills.
I know, me too. I just got really hot all of a sudden. That's so funny. Okay, so I'll say what he said. I wrote this down, and I'm paraphrasing this bit. That they didn't believe that God created the shadow beings. They called them shadow beings. But he said they were created out of our own energy field that began to take on their own consciousness of reality, becoming consciously present. And then he said, it's not necessarily that they were evil or are evil, but they feed off negative emotions. And when there is more and more anger, like negative emotions being shame, guilt, jealousy, fear in particular, that it was almost like we complete them, is how he put it. But now I would say what I always felt was that, well, he likened them to... what was it called? A maggot. How a maggot will eat off the...
Yeah, can I expound on that part? So the significance of... That's one reason why I jumped in when we said energy vampire. Because to me, energy vampire to me, I feel like I'm being strictly preyed upon. And we think if you're, that sounds very, very draining. But he used the analogy of a maggot, because if you have dis-ease in the body or like flesh that's rotting and you put a maggot on it, it's only going to eat the flesh that's rotting. It's not going to eat the clean tissue. It's just going to eat what's decaying. And I think in that way, he's kind of demystifying the process a little. Like, they don't seem quite as scary. Like, look, you don't want to run into these things. But, like, they seem a little less scary when you think of them as just kind of taking this excess naughty energy that we don't want around, you know?
However, though, he did go into... Yeah. And what I would say is what what I always felt to be true, what I always seemed to know, was it feels to me like evil predates man. That there's light, dark, and shadow. There's things of shadow. And that was around before man. And then it reminds me when they talk about how it feeds off the negative energy, especially like when there's war, that they're starting to become... We're starting to see these things more, these shadow beings or anything, really, because man is sort of descending into a bit of a frenzy. So, yes.
But he was also talking about I don't think he said phenomenon, but the way that everything is speeding up.
Yeah. And
that there's something about the way that everything's speeding up vibrationally. It's almost for I would say what we've said in the past. It's like the veil is thinning. Yeah. So they're being perceived more.
Exactly. They've always been there. It's just some of us are starting to. And he also said when I was listening earlier today that we're almost bringing them out more ourselves with all of the evil.
Well, I've said for a long time, I think there's an actual. I think the horror genre, there's a lack of responsibility and accountability there. For I don't want to get into it because I'm not trying to make this like political statement. I know people like love these movies. I'm just telling you, as an intuitive horror, though. Horror.
No, I don't like slasher films. Right. I don't like that.
That's what I'm making
like
a distinction because
you're right.
Supernatural's interesting, and I like psychological thrillers. But like gross horror, I think a lot of that. That's exactly that type of energy that something like this would feed off of, if you will.
Exactly. And it's desensitizing people. What I was going to say, what it reminds me of, though, not even just feeding off of people's energy, but when you see in movies, The Omen, for instance, or even The Passion of the Christ, in The Omen, you see, like when they discover... They unearth this talisman of the devil. You know. I love The Omen, by the way. But you see dogs fighting.
I've never seen it, but
I know I can't believe this.
I know. I grew up.
But it's a great flick.
I'm just not as desensitized. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Whatever. But when something evil is about, like the dogs start fighting, people start fighting, and you see the evil, or as in The Passion of the Christ, when all these people are screaming and yelling and fighting and throwing rocks at each other, and you see the devil walking along behind them silently and no one sees it. I think that is true. That's what it feels like to me. And it feels like there's more of a frenzy of that of late.
I want
there's prophecies
you
about
to
this
just
stuff.
Elaborate slightly on what you mean when you say that is true. I suspect what you're saying is that's how you think the world is, but we just can't all see it.
Yeah.
Where like, in the foreground, if you will, there's. Go for it. Well, do you want me to... I had a couple things. I wanted to list off a few more of the things that people talk about seeing, and feel free to add to this list. So we're saying shadow people. Some people will say shadow man. There's like a movie about that too. Fiction, right? But there's also nonfiction stuff. There's Slender Man. There's the old hag.
Oh yeah.
There's a nightmare, like an incubus, that's associated with sleep paralysis. There's the Hat Man, like the man with a hat and his minions. Sometimes it's seen where like there's the main guy with his hat, and then he has like these shadow people behind, but with him doing
I've
his
seen
bidding, but they don't all have hats. Mothman, which I feel like you were kind of describing something that I was like, oh, that sounds a little like Mothman. Cats on the chest is a thing that people see, which sounds
Some with
terrifying.
red eyes, some not.
And again, cats on the chest, sleep paralysis. What I saw, I don't have a name for, but you have a story about something on this list. So what is it that
the hat
involved the
guy.
hat that and what would you call it? The hat guy? Was it
I guess, I mean, and by the way, I had two other friends. Scott saw this hat guy himself at some point. And another friend of mine, Brad, had seen this hat guy.
Sorry.
It was in St. Louis. I lived in U City at the time. It was Christmas Eve, and I used to run at night. I started jogging, and I heard footsteps, like sort of across the way, like parallel. I actually lived on Dartmouth, if anybody lives in U City. It was this really beautiful little neighborhood with all these parallel streets. And on the other side of the block, I could see this very tall man dressed in a black overcoat with a black wide-brimmed hat. I guess I don't know if it's a fedora, but it seemed a little wider. And he was walking across the other side, and he sort of waved to me. So I waved back. I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. And I just kept jogging. But I was very aware of this person for some reason, because he was walking, and he was very tall. I don't know if I said that.
You did.
As I got to each block, shut up. As I got to each block, I would look up, and I would see that guy. He was even Steven with me, and he nodded his head towards me. So I kind of nodded back, and I just kept jogging. And then it started to dawn on me, like after this happened like 3 or 4 times, I'm like, he's keeping up with me, and he's just walking. And then I realized I turned around, and I started coming back to the house. I started getting kind of spooked, and I started to speed up. And then I could hear his footsteps speeding up. And then as I looked over there, I realized it was all blackness. There was no face. I just assumed it was a man. And then all of a sudden, I got this dread feeling, and not to be dramatic, but I've never felt this way since, but for my soul. Like I was truly afraid for my soul. And I took off running. And that thing kept up with me across the street. And then afterwards, I remember when I was talking to some of my friends about this, because I didn't talk about this to many people other than a couple of the guys that I mentioned. They were just friends. Because they were like, have you seen this? And that's what made me talk about it. And I realized, how could I even see his face? He was so far away from me. But it was like zoomed up in some weird way. It was like I could see that there was no face there. It was just blackness. And just the deepest, darkest shadow. But he had a black overcoat and a black top hat. Not a top hat, but like a fedora type, but wider brim. And I could hear his shoes. And then I ran to my house. I got into the door as fast as I could and slammed the door. And I was like, whoa. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that since. But I know other people have, too.
And I feel like some of the people who've described some guys similar have even made references to, like, is this Zorro?
Yeah.
Because there's almost like a cape or
There's another guy that has like a cape. Yeah, they thought he was Zorro. He was like that, but with my guy had a trench coat or an overcoat. Mm-hmm. But yeah, even that's something else though. The Zorro guy. Some people think that's like a Men in Black, but that's a totally different.
Oh yeah, that wasn't on my list. Men in Black. That's more. That I don't even know if I can go into that because honestly, I found in the research it was hard to get a straight. Here's the thing. When you go online for this stuff, people are borrowing different terms and trying to make sense of experiences, and they're researching, and then that starts to like compound over each other. And I don't know. I think you really have to go through a lot of information to start to really discern what the overall experience of people is, like where the commonalities are. But
You know what was interesting to me about this was that all of the people, we watched this documentary about sleep paralysis, and one of the women on there, a lot of these people used to make fun of religion, or they weren't religious, but this one lady in particular, we both really liked her. She said it made her believe in God. She used to make fun of it. And she really felt like it was a true spiritual warfare. And that's kind of the trick, which is why I was touching on earlier, of maybe darkness, that tries to make you think, oh, that's silly, it's not real.
She's the one who in the documentary mentioned invoking the name of Christ and the importance of that. And I think she was also the one who mentioned, maybe it was someone else, that she felt like she understood it to be that they were feeding off of fear. That they were
fear.
And that's kind of the functionality of it, is that they come in, there's like this menacing dark presence, and they're feeding off the fear that comes off of us, almost like this thick black like ink. Yeah,
comes off of you, and they're like absorbing that. Other people would say they saw this guy with a hat at the end of their bed, and it would be touching them or something, and they got cancer, or they got they had a thing in their throat, or they got
that was an interview, right? The
Right?
woman said something came and grabbed her throat, and then she developed breast cancer, or I might be combining a few interviews.
There's quite a few. The one
was
lady
a
said she
lot.
had a lump in her throat. One lady
Yes.
said she got breast cancer.
You're right. There was a lump in the throat.
There was another lady who said that her neighbor who saw that man with the hat in his house went crazy after that. Like, bad things would always happen. Nothing bad happened to me, other than I was scared to death. But, when I saw it. But I guess the point, like what even Thunderstrike says, is that there's different things out there. There's different levels of things. You can burn sage. Like, don't be afraid. I think knowledge is power, and that's what he said. There's just a lot of stuff out there.
A few quotes from people. These are dark figures, usually only appearing at night. There are different theories to which classification these entities belong. People have been trying to classify shadow people and categorize them as ghosts. The difference is that ghosts are usually misty white figures, sometimes looking almost human, and performing tasks that a human once performed. Whereas shadow people are usually 6 feet tall or taller, some wearing a coat and hat. This is where it gets fuzzy, where some people get it all, they start to blend different ideas. The most well-known is the Hat Man. They are dark, almost resembling a black mass, not being translucent. They usually show up and appear to stare with no visible eye, not speaking or interacting. There are several types of categories of shadow people, and then they talk about bedroom watchers, shadow on walls, moving shadows, background visitors, haunting presence. But this says shadow people are not considered ghosts, but more watchers. It is thought in common folklore that these are interdimensional beings. They usually appear when a person is sleeping. Some researchers state they find ways into the physical world and have the purpose of watching humans, and the reason they show up as bedroom visitors is the nature of a human sleeping or dreaming through consciousness enables them to enter into our world. As they watch humans, sometimes when they are watching, a person experiences paralysis, suffocation, or being choked. That happened to me. I mean, very much. Many people who have reported seeing shadow people associate them as evil, like a demon. Most people that experience shadow people sense a frightening sensation when seeing them. Sometimes when you encounter a shadow person, your emotions change toward anger, sadness, loneliness, etc. Some people are more open to experience shadow people. Let me just really...
This is
okay,
great.
and then this one says, these beings have been documented as far back as how do you say this? 1153 BC? 1000?
I was going to say, I heard like 1100 BC, something
Yeah.
like that.
But there's still so much unknown about them. No documentation has really been able of anybody being able to communicate with them, and they only show up when they want to. And it's also said that they're more likely to show up when a person is going through an emotional state, and they use that energy to enter our world.
Yes.
And I think yes.
That's interesting that they use that state to enter our world. That was something that I heard too. Wow.
Yeah.
This is cheery, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, and I feel like I've had, when I tell people about this podcast, or my mother, about what topics,
Yeah.
it's usually people are like, "Wow, why so dark?" And I guess it does make me want to point out that there are also benevolent experiences, and I have one. I was living in Southeast Asia, specifically Vietnam, and for every night for weeks, I would get awoken at 3:33 a.m. And I say get awoken because it was usually like a very sudden alertness, and it was so consistent that it felt like I felt like there's a mystery I was supposed to solve, and I just couldn't figure it out. But it felt like I was being watched over, but in a positive way. Even though it was a little bit eerie in that it was unknown to me what was going on, and I could sense kind of a presence, and that can be a little scary when you don't really understand what's happening. And at that time I didn't. I could tell the difference between something menacing and something that was
Good.
not going to harm me. And I think that's important because I think sometimes our fear convinces us what we're experiencing might be bad when it really isn't. And an example of that might be if we're having a visitation from a family member that's passed over. That can be a little scary. But I think more often than not, it's going to be a peaceful experience. You know?
Peaceful. Thunderstrikes and other people had said this too, that bad things will pretend to be good things when they come to visit. So use your instinct. Like really, really listen, because a good thing is pure. It comes from a place of love. I think that's important to say.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
wow, that was kind of a fun one, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a bit of a ride.
Yeah.
Did you have more you wanted to add?
No, I'm just really happy you said that there are good things out there too. But I think knowledge is power, and it's important because a lot of people see this stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes you see the more scary things first before you see the good things, or vice versa. But just be aware. Be smart. I guess.
Yeah, for me growing up, I did experience all sorts of things as a child, but I don't remember seeing them. I remember feeling them though, and it was, I don't know. I don't like to think about it, I guess. I don't think I really allow myself to go back there, but I only bring that up to say that I think a lot of us are in touch with this other side as children, and that we lose it because, well, it's not talked about, and it's been made to seem crazy and bizarre and like, oh, we don't talk about these things, and or it's too scary for a parent to hear this from their kid. Because maybe they experienced it themselves, and now they've had to shut it out of their mind. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we have people of all ages and all sorts of life experiences listening to us, and so I want to try to remember that some people may be younger and really new to all this and just starting out, and that I don't know. Do you kind of get what I'm saying?
No, that's wise. That's wise. And I think it's like we had said earlier, remember that it's almost an invitation, so just be responsible about it and, be accountable. This is something that Thunderstrikes had tried to say, is that, life is choice, and that we wake up, be accountable, and assume responsibility, because this is your life and you can choose how you want it to be to an extent. So don't be afraid of these things. I think it's good to talk about this because you should be aware, because I think it's like we said, a lot of people do see this and there's no one really talking about it. We're talking about it because it's a phenomenon,
and
but
yet
also
there's Facebook groups There's forums online. There's people sharing their stories on YouTube. So it's getting out there. It's becoming more common, but it's also starting to get mixed in with
Bullshit.
bullshit. So that
We're not, so here you go. You know what I mean?
I know you said don't be afraid of them, but
You should be a little...
this is not something you want to mess with. You don't like, this shouldn't intrigue you and make you want to encounter these creatures, these beings or whatever. Like, that's...
So you're right. I think we're kind of putting out a warning.
Yeah, this is more of a warning. Like, we don't recommend you living in fear, but we also...
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is the... It's... Because you should be... I mean, I guess I try to cover it and be like, okay, don't be afraid. Because you don't want to live in fear, but yet you need to be aware of what's going on. And a lot of people are waking up, or a lot of people have experienced this, but they talk themselves out of it. And we're here to be there for you in a way, and to say, okay, that's real, but be smart. You know what I mean?
And I feel like I interrupted you a little bit when you were talking about the sage, the thunder strikes. Is it weird to say what I say when I burn sage?
What do you mean? Do you only allow good?
I only invite what's good, true, and beautiful.
I think that's good to say. And you want to? Okay.
There's more to it. I say more. Should I say more?
Let's say this first. If you're gonna burn sage to like get rid of a bad feeling, let's say, or a bad energy, you want to make sure you crack a window.
Just
to
one.
Just one. Everything else is closed off, so that way it has a place to go.
And that window is where you're going to end. You're going to start, you're going to work your way through your entire home, and you're going to end at the window as if you're pushing it out.
And I usually cast out whatever is dark and of shadow, and I only allow love, highest vibration. And then what do you say? You say some really beautiful stuff, actually.
I say I only invite what's good, true, and beautiful. Darkness and evil go back from whence you came. Only Christ's divine love and light is invited here. So I'm covering all my bases. Because I'm saying,
hurt, people. Doesn't
if you're
hurt.
bad, get out. But invoking the name of Christ is key.
I think it is. And you tell it to leave. There's one more thing that keeps popping in my head. When I was having a lot of these bad experiences, my brother had told me not to talk about it too much because you're giving it power again.
Yes.
So there is there's power in knowing the name of something, which is why Bridget didn't say the name of a certain thing. I mean,
I realize I have a list of names staring at me.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much more, you guys. And you can email us at yeahsortakinda.
When we're done here, I'm going to burn this.
Yeah, I think that's a wise choice. I'm starting to feel like this one a little more serious. Yeah, this one a little more serious than I intended it to go. But
oh, really?
But I feel like
I was figured we'd dive into this.
Oh, I figured we would too, but I've got this like weird feeling I'm gonna crack a window when we're done. I'm gonna burn some sage and some Palo Santo. I really am. But you know, it's been a weird few days. But yeah,
I'd say put all this out of your minds, guys. Say a prayer.
Yeah, just know you can be protected. You can protect yourself. I guess that's
for everything dark. There's something gooder.
There's something. There's
for everything bad out there or evil.
Gooder.
There's something gooder.
Good wins. Just remember that. That's what's.
Wait, good wins.
Good wins.
Wins.
The gooder wins. Yeah.
The gooder wins. Oh,
and then
man.
I winked, but it's true.
It's kind of late. Can you tell we're getting delirious?
Yeah. We've been.
Well, this is the longest. One of the longest we've ever gone, but we
I think it's a good one.
We kind of knew we would.
Yeah, we wanted it.
That.
We wanted to talk about the experiences, and we wanted to talk about, well, what does this mean? Why even talk about this? And what do you do? And to tell our own personal experiences, and
we want to hear more from you guys than we already are.
Yeah, we've heard a
'cause
lot. Thanks, guys. But
Yeah, but we
We're
would
here
love.
for
I
you.
think the email is probably the best if you want to be long-winded, and if you want us both to see it, yeahsortakinda@gmail.com. But you're welcome to message us elsewhere
Yeah.
too. We're really active on Instagram, so
yes, tell people about us. Like and subscribe. Just thanks for being there. And we're here for you. And I think next week we might be talking about hypnosis and
right.
the
So we
unconscious,
may
possibly.
actually have our first interviewee.
Yeah.
Yeah, we may have a guest for next
That's what-
Wednesday.
That's what we're looking to do. So if it all lines up, that's what it's going to be. So let us know your thoughts and stay safe. We love you guys.
Yes,
Sorta.
kinda.
Kind of. No, we do. We do. It's just a good play on words
We
right
love
there.
most of you.
Most of you. No, we do.
No, so far.
You guys are. Yeah,
You're
so far, you
all
guys are
very
cool.
likable.
So far, you guys
So
have been
far.
really cool.
So far, so good.
Anyway, well, thanks a lot, guys. So we will see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, stop this.
Ow, I just hit my.
Don't hurt yourself.